What's up, my channel? It's your friend from the neighborhood, Sassy Blonde Writer, coming at you with another writing video. Today we are doing a trope talk. Today we are talking about the trope of writing a musician. Specifically, how to write a musician character from an actual musician. Now, if you didn't know this about me, I actually went to school for music, specifically singing. No, I will not sing for you right now. Maybe one day if I hit like 100 subscribers or something. I just want to start this off by saying that I am specifically a singer. I am classically trained. I used to sing opera, but I've also sung other types of music, and I've been around people who are involved in a variety of types of music. I know several people who are in a Led Zeppelin cover band together, and also in an originals band together that plays rock music. I'm friends with several people who rap and are putting out albums on the side. And I'm also friends with people who work on Broadway. And one thing we can all agree on, despite our various tastes in music, is TV always gets it wrong. Whether it's the nitty-gritty stuff between how rehearsals work for a band, or writing music with a drum machine, or if it's just general atmosphere when you're practicing in an environment or going to school for music, Hollywood gets a lot of things wrong. So I figured I'd make a video since I kind of have the inside scoop to this sort of thing. Just kind of a little gateway into what it's like to be a musician for realsies, so that way when you try to write a musician character, you can do it in a way that's a little bit more informed than, say, certain TV shows that enjoy doing pop covers and make it seem like all you need to know are the lyrics to learn a song. Riverdale. Before we get started, I just want to say, please remember to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell. I don't want you to miss any of my fabulous content. That would be a real shame. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. There are a lot of tropes around musician characters in pop culture, so I picked like 7 of them to go into depth with today. So here we go. Trope 1. Non-musicians writing musician characters. If you want to write a story about something, surely you would try to learn about it, right? Wrong. Apparently. There are a lot of nuances in music, especially depending on what genre of music that you are featuring in whatever you're writing, that you need to know about before you can really begin writing. And yet for some reason there are writers whose last music class was probably in elementary school. Don't take that into account when they write musician characters, because all music is learned the same way, right? Wrong. You're wrong. If you are going to write a musician character, please try to learn at least the terminology for that specific genre of music and the different conventions of that genre of music, the ways you write the music, just your basics about that genre before you get to writing anything about a character who does that. The terminology used in an orchestra rehearsal is not the same as an opera or musical theater or a rock band or hip hop or rap. Each genre of music has its own separate type of vocabulary, its own methods of songwriting, rehearsing, and performing. And this makes sense. The way Mozart composed music on staff paper and a pen is not the same way a rapper using a drum machine would work. And the way a jazz band learns music with charts is not the same as how an opera singer sight reads her part to learn it for the rehearsal. And remember, just because you listen to a certain type of music does not make you an expert on it. Just because you listen to Hamilton doesn't make you a god of musical theater. Just because you listen to rap and hip hop doesn't mean you know everything about it. Each genre has its own specific history as well, and it's a different function in the world. If you are writing a musician character, I suggest you find some people who write music in that genre and have them explain it to you. I would also recommend that you have them read whatever you wrote to make sure that you actually got it right. That goes for instruments too. Drum machines aren't always played or used the same ways as drum kits or timpanis are. If you can't find somebody, some real live person to talk to you or help you read it, go on Reddit. Reddit has everything. There's definitely people out there who would be more than happy to answer your questions about the basics of it. This goes for every type of genre. If your characters are the band geeks in high school, talk to some people you know who were in band. If your character is a soprano in an opera, find some people who like opera or used to perform it. Each genre and each musician in a different genre of music learns differently and performs differently. And that's great. I love all different forms of music. I've studied it, but they're all different and you have to take the time and care to learn it. I mean, if you want to do justice to your musician character, that is. Trope 2, the tortured artist. This stereotype makes me really mad. It's because the tortured artist is usually used as a stock character or real-life stereotype who is in constant torment due to frustrations with art, other people, or just the world in general. Now, most people cite the greats like Vincent van Gogh because he suffered from psychosis, anxiety, and addiction when he created some of his best work. Other examples are Frida Kahlo, Sylvia Plath, Kurt Cobain, Charlie Bird Parker, and Ludwig van Beethoven. Bet you never thought all those names would come up at the same time. There have been studies done that say creativity and mental illness are correlated. However, as I remember from my intro to psych class, correlation does not equal causation. Now, this trope specifically makes me really mad because it romanticizes mental illness. Honestly, since the inception of this trope, and I'll link to some of my sources down below, but since the inception of this trope, it has been criticized for doing that, treating mental illness like it's a necessary ingredient for creativity, when that's just not true. I actually had a professor in college who supported the idea of the tortured artist and supported the idea that in order to be creative, you have to suffer. You can't take care of yourself. You have to ignore self-care. If you can't tell, I did not like this professor. He went on this whole monologue about it to a whole class full of musicians who were just starting to go to therapy and take care of themselves, and we exploded on him. And with good reason too. There is data out there stating that tortured artists that I just named made their best work when they were taking care of themselves. Their trauma had nothing to do with how creative they were. Their creativity was always there. The trauma just happened to them and they were able to thrive in spite of the trauma, not because of the trauma. And I also don't like the idea of romanticizing trauma. So all of Vincent van Gogh's work was created as a form of art therapy for him. And he made his best work when he was recovering from psychosis and addictions because his brother loved him and made sure he got help. Those are the reasons why he created the daisies. It wasn't because he was tortured and that was the only way to let it out. He was recovering when he made his best work, and that's the same for all those other examples. And because they were so creative, the creativity was able to help them cope. But the creativity was already there. And this was also a form of therapy for them because of the stigma around mental health. To say that you need to be a tortured artist to create anything good glamorizes suffering and trauma and mental illness. I do not recommend anyone use this trope. Or if you do, please make sure your focus is not on the artist's suffering and how that created their work. Make sure your focus is on the steps that the artist needs to take in order to get better and to treat themselves in addition to their work. Trope number 3, the obsessed artist or the determinator. So what is the determinator, you ask? Well, it's kind of what it sounds like. This person is determined to be the best, no matter what cost. So the determinator is a character, good or evil, male or female, young or old, who never gives up, ever, no matter what. There is no stopping the determinator. They do not understand tact. They do not understand know when to fold them, know when to give up, strategic retreat, and it's a waste of time to tell them the odds. No one can reason with them. They'll do whatever they have to do without question. No price is too great to pay for success, up to and including their own life. So that is the anatomy of the obsessed artist. Now, Lessons from a Screenplay has a fabulous video that goes through 2 really good examples, Black Swan and Whiplash. And I'm going to link to the video down below because it is really good. Honestly, watching it was part of the inspiration for me to make this video. This trope of the obsessed artist really just boils down to perfectionism in the arts. This trope is probably one of the more common in the real world. I don't like this trope, and I'll explain why in a little bit, but I've definitely seen people turn into the obsessed artist because they have to get this one thing right, and it will be what ruins them if they don't get it right. They're gonna get this song right or die trying. I think the 2 best examples of this trope, which I've found from a lot of sources, are, like I said before, Whiplash and Black Swan. Why are they both so popular? Because both are niche art forms forms like jazz for Whiplash or ballet for Black Swan. Little known about them in the mainstream. Both movies are about a very talented person and their very difficult relationship with a very demanding mentor. In both movies, the mentor acts in a very ambiguous, sometimes in a positive way, but most of the time just totally unimpressed by the student, causing great confusion and a decline in self-confidence. So that is something that actually does happen when you study music, especially on a collegiate level, because you're used to being the big fish in the pond, and there are a lot of people who think that they can just coast on their own talent. You see that in every type of art form. Like the person in high school who's used to being the best of the best percussionist in symphonic band, which was the advanced band or something like that. And then they get to college and they meet like 30 other people who are just like them, also have the same skill set. I appreciate this trope on one hand because it kind of shows that raw talent isn't enough. You need to also have the work ethic. However, this trope takes it too far, and you'll see why. So in both of these movies, the mentor uses the trick to assign a slightly less talented person to the same role to compete with the main character in order to increase motivation. Both movies end with the protagonist against all odds delivering a stellar performance, proving once and for all that they are the best person for the job, and finally earning the respect of their mentor. If you're a musician, a dancer, or an actor, you probably know why I hate this trope. I hate this trope because, again, it romanticizes the idea that you shouldn't take care of yourself in order to create better things, and it also treats dance, art, and theater as if it's a competitive sport. If you're involved in dance or theater or music, you know that it is a collaborative effort. That's half the fun. It also supports the idea that misery builds character, which it doesn't. Misery builds misery. And it also supports the idea that dealing with an abusive jerk is the only way to bring out your potential. No good has ever come from a toxic work environment, and that's what the mentors in both of these movies create. Also like to point out that Whiplash gets a lot of music stuff wrong. If you're a non-musician, you want to write a musician character, get to know some musicians or Google stuff. Get it right. So I think one of the best ways to illustrate how Whiplash gets it wrong is because they get a specific story about Charlie the Bird Parker wrong. Charlie Parker was a jazz musician, and Fletcher, who's the mentor character, who's terrible and abusive, and I hate him, likes to tell of an incident that happened in the Reno Club in Kansas City when Charlie Parker sat in on a jam session and played quite poorly. The house drummer, Joe Jones, was not impressed with Charlie Parker's playing, and so, according to Fletcher, he threw a cymbal at Charlie Parker, nearly decapitating him, which inspired Parker to go home, practice, and be one of the greats. That's not what happened at all. So the actual story is Joe Jones dropped the cymbal like a gong, as in like ding dong, like Charlie stopped playing, and told Charlie Parker, "Sorry, you're not good enough for this session, come back later when you've had time to practice." That's more realistic to what would actually happen in that situation if you show up to a band practice or a rehearsal and not know your stuff. Like, they just end the practice or tell you, go home and practice on your own time and we'll do this again some other time. Somebody throws a cymbal at your head and almost decapitates you, why would you ever want to work with them again? So the latter type of conversation is something that I've had myself, and I've definitely seen other people have with conductors, directors, teachers, a lot more often than I had somebody yell at me for missing one note. Was I still embarrassed? Yes. Did I fear for my life? No. Trope 4. Band geek, orchestra kids, theater nerds, and Glee club. A staple in many American high schools, especially TV shows. The band geek is always in the band room. They're usually seen traipsing down the hall with their instrument case or jamming out in a practice room during study hall. They're never the cool kids and are generally outcasts or nerds. Note that this contrasts a lot from the cool kids in a band who are generally like cool rebels. So there's band geeks, as in marching band geeks usually, and then kids in a band who are usually cool. Kids in the school band are usually straight-laced geeks. And it's the same for the other tropes. The orchestra kids are always in the orchestra room. The theater kids are always trying to get into the auditorium. Sometimes the more religious band geeks are found staring at their sheet music and annotating it, and expect the sheet music to look insanely hard. The band geek is by no means a rare breed. Despite not being conventionally cool or popular, they exist usually in huge numbers. Glee Club is usually viewed the same way as shown in the show Glee, where they're always in the music room, they're always talking about music, blah 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 blah. They're never really the cool kids. Now, when I was in high school, I was a band geek and a theater nerd and in Glee Club, but so were a lot of the popular kids. And a lot of the sports kids too. That's probably one of the tougher parts, was that kids usually had to choose between sports and music, and you sometimes could make them work, but sometimes you miss a rehearsal to go to a game, practice to perform at a concert, etc. Honestly, this is how I became friends with the quote-unquote popular kids. So band geeks aren't always geeks. I mean, sometimes they are. The more dedicated band geeks usually tend to obsess over their sheet music and carry their instruments around. And I mean, there were a lot of, anytime I had free time, I would usually try to get to the music room so I could practice. But I think the one thing I don't like about this trope is that it implies that just because you're in band means you're a nerd, when that's just not always the case. Just because you're in band or Glee Club or Orchestra doesn't mean you're not one of the cool kids too, because cool kids like music too. So it's a pretty inaccurate trope, at least that part, because nowadays more and more schools are trying to make it possible to do all the things, to do sports and to be a cheerleader who's also on the marching band somehow. I think it's inaccurate because of that. That is my one note I will add to that trope. Trope number 5, garage band. This trope is often played in fiction as the ragtag group of teenagers become a found family. For bonus points, it could probably be a group of emo teens forming a band. Most rarely it will consist of middle-aged adults. Usually that's played for laughs. Sometimes the band is a spur-of-the-moment thing, started as a weekend project or to win a talent show or battle of the bands, and it becomes the entire plot of the episode if it's in a TV show, or it's most of the plot of the movie. Often the band will break up at the end, or maybe not. The garage band usually plays into the trope of girls love musicians, right? That's something to consider. Usually they're the offbeat kids, where they would never be in like band in school because that's too conformist, man. I think the most accurate portrayal of the garage band would probably be Gilmore Girls, with Lane Kim joining a band, because I mean, it doesn't take over their life. They try to make sure practices happen and they all love what they do, but they also have side jobs. They also are trying to get record deals and record and stuff. That's just something to keep in mind if you're writing a character that's in a garage band. Trope 6. Musicians can learn music in minutes, right? No practice necessary. So this ties into trope number 1, not musicians writing musicians, because this is always a sign that whoever is writing the book, TV show, or the movie is not a musician. So many times in Riverdale and Pitch Perfect and Glee do you see students, high school students, or maybe college students who barely know how to sing, haven't seen a piece of sheet music in years, learn several songs in full instrumental or choral arrangements with 4 to 6 part harmony, and memorize the words in a span of 2 minutes. That's literally impossible. Maybe you're a really good sight reader and you could figure out the part really quickly, but there's no way you'd be able to memorize it in that amount of time. Maybe 2 hours, but you'd still probably be a little rusty on the words, so just make sure you keep the practice time realistic. If you're just handing somebody a song for the first time, it's not going to be polished. It's probably gonna sound like a hot piece of garbage at first, and then you practice and it gets better. My 7th and final trope, Julliard is the only school that teaches music, all types of music, and higher education. So that's literally just not true. Most colleges teach music. However, if you want to go to a school like Julliard, it's classical music. So most schools in higher education do not teach all different types of music. If you want to go to college for music, chances are you're going to be learning jazz music, or you're going to be learning classical music, maybe musical theater. The school is really progressive. If you want to become a pop songwriter, you can always go to school for music. You can get a BA in music, that's totally fine, but they won't teach you the conventions of pop music. Most schools only offer classical music and jazz, and that's pretty much it. If they have a drama department, that's probably where you'd learn musical theater, if that's what you're really interested in. So the reason why I bring this up is because it's very common in movies and TV shows marketed to young adults specifically who are looking at colleges, and anytime there's a musician character, they're always looking to go to Julliard. Or if they're a music teacher, they're always from Julliard. I would like to say this: Julliard is for performers. Don't learn how to be a music teacher from Julliard necessarily. And their main focus is classical music. I remember on Riverdale, Josie of Josie and the Pussycats auditioned for Julliard and didn't get in. Did she look at schools that actually let her study contemporary music and like pop and jazz, like the Berklee College of Music? No. Did she ever acknowledge or show an understanding that Julliard is mainly a classical school of music? No. Did she look into literally any other path to achieve her goals? Also no. I don't think the writers even looked at Julliard's auditions page, because if they had, the whole plot line would have been avoided. She literally shows up to her college audition. She doesn't have any sheet music. She just sings a cappella. She doesn't have an accompanist or anything, and that's something that kind of drives me crazy because Julliard is also super selective. Julliard is not the only school of music. There are plenty of other schools out there, and if you want to be a pop star, do you really want to go to school for music? Like, if you want to get into songwriting, sure, but if you want to be like a pop singer, the closest you'll probably get at studying at the collegiate level is jazz. That's all I got for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed my rant against tropes about musicians. If you want to hear me rant some more about different tropes or hear a little bit more trope talk, please let me know in the comments below and hit that like button so I know you want to see more videos like this. Remember to subscribe to my channel. I post new videos on Wednesdays, and of course, happy writing.